Hi everybody, my name is Kim Hargrave and I'm the Education Director here at the Denison Pequotsepos Nature Center. And today we're going to talk more about animals in wintertime, but instead of talking about all of our warm-blooded animals like our mammals and birds, we're going to concentrate on our cold-blooded animals, the turtles and the snakes, and what they do to get through the winter. Now when we think about animals who hibernate, we might think about bears with their nice thick warm fur, or groundhogs who go underneath the ground. But we don't really necessarily think about how a snake does it. How would a snake stay warm when this is its skin? It's not going to cut it. If I put this on and went outside, I'd be really, really cold today.
Very different from that fur.
Very, very different than this nice warm thick bear fur here. And the biggest difference is cold-blooded animals have a different way of using their environment. Warm-blooded animals like you and I and bears, our bodies work hard to keep our body temperatures at a certain level. In our case, I think we all know 98.6 right now. And with reptiles, their body temperatures are dependent on their surrounding environment. So whether the air temperature is warm, whether the rocks are warm or cold, their body temperatures adjust to that.
So like when I woke up this morning and it was 16 degrees.
So you had to put on a lot of layers to help your body stay warm. A snake obviously can't do that, and their body temperature is going to go way down. And if a snake's body temperature or any reptile's body temperature gets too cold, they get lethargic and they can't really move around. So they have to do something to get through the winter. And so what our reptiles do is it kind of looks like hibernation, but it's called brumation. So that starts with a B, brumation. And so our animals are brumating. And you might think very similar to hibernating. Their respirations slow down, so they're not breathing so much. Their metabolic rates go down, so they're digesting even slower than usual. And their body temperature goes way down as well, into the 30s usually. And so for people who just saw our visitor come by, that was a warm-blooded animal. That was Rosie.
Right, she is not a reptile at all.
Nope. But she is our ambassador bird here at the Nature Center. She's one of them, and she is a pigeon that was rescued from somebody's feeder where she was very underweight and brought in. And since she is non-releasable, she has become a wonderful addition to our education birds here at the Nature Center.
Someone was just asking about her the other day, and I mentioned that she would likely make an appearance. So again, that's Rosie, and she is our trusty assistant who sometimes helps during Facebook Lives, but always brings character to what we are presenting.
All right. So the other big difference between brumation and hibernation is an animal who brumates, like a cold-blooded snake or turtle. They don't put on any body weight before they go into hibernation. A bear and a groundhog spend most of the year actually eating so that they can survive the winter. And birds who migrate, all right, also have to put on a lot of body fat so that they can survive migration. All right, so that's one of the big differences. The other big difference is an animal who's brumating can wake up really easily. When the weather gets warm and their surrounding temperatures get warm, their body temperature warms up and they are awake and they're moving around. An animal who's truly hibernating, like a groundhog, when the air gets warm, let's say we get a 60-degree day in January, they don't wake up. They stay in hibernation. Even if their burrow gets disturbed, a groundhog's burrow starts to get disturbed, they still won't wake up. It's really, really hard to wake up a hibernating animal. A brumating animal, really all that has to happen is the temperature has to go up and they start to emerge.
And what will happen, say, if we get those unusually warm days, which we often do at some point, maybe during the early months of the year, and then it starts to get cold again? What are the adaptations that snakes have to be able to adjust to that?
So snakes, they can, because they're not having stored body fat and they're not using as much body fat to keep their body temperatures at a certain temperature, they can just use the surrounding environment, they can just go back to sleep. Not a big deal. That's why every now and then you'll see like a painted turtle popping its head out if we get a January thaw and the ice melts, that they're okay. You know, they can come up to the surface and get air, and then when the pond refreezes, they can go back down.
So while we think it might be a disadvantage to not have that thick fur like a bear, because they have, again, a very different scaly skin, they actually have that awesome adaptation to be able to adjust to those changing temperatures that we are so used to here in New England.
That's right. All right, so what I wanted to do first was talk about, there's 3 types of reptiles that live in Connecticut. We have snakes, we have turtles, and then we do have a lizard, the 5-blind skink, but it's not that common, so we're going to skip talking about skinks today and just talk about snakes and turtles.
Our friends Carol are chiming in. Good morning from Massachusetts. And we have Linda tuning in from Maine, and it's 10 degrees there. So we are, I think, above 20 now.
Yep.
But 16 was a chilly start.
It was. All right. So, Rosie, I don't want you to help with this one, okay?
All right. So we do have some animals that are going to be coming out. They are residents here. And you will see also part of the reason that Rosie lives with us is she's definitely imprinted on humans and does not seemingly have the instincts to know things that are not healthy for her to hang out with.
It's like Toby right here. Toby is an eastern rat snake right here, who's one of our resident snakes at the Nature Center.
And definitely one of our staff favorites.
Definitely one of our staff favorites. And Toby actually is, she was all stretched out, probably about 5 feet long or so. No checking out Rosie. Rosie, you need to keep your distance.
I will try to deflect. And the good news is we are confident, again, to be able to keep them separate.
Oh, yeah,
so
absolutely.
Don't worry. For our Rosie fans that are tuning in, she will be just fine.
She will.
And Toby will be as well.
As well, that's right.
Okay, so what is Toby again?
All right, so Toby is the eastern rat snake right here. And eastern rat snakes have a really interesting adaptation for the winter. They like to go to a hibernaculum where they'll brumate, usually with about 25 to 30 other eastern rat snakes and black racers, which is another species of snake that we have here. So in a lot of hibernaculums, you'll actually end up with mixed species of snakes. Even snakes that might normally eat each other will end up hibernating or brumating in the same areas. And that's because they won't bother each other. Once their body temperatures go below 60, they don't want to eat, so they won't even eat each other if they are brumating next to each other for the winter time.
Now, our snakes are okay. They're not actually going to brumate because they're indoors with us, correct?
That's right. We keep our snake enclosures always at a constant temperature so that our snakes don't go through brumation and things like that.
And that doesn't cause them any harm?
It does not cause them any harm, anything like that. If we were really interested in breeding our snakes, we would probably have to let them go through, a small brumation and things like that. So, all right. So when we look at Toby right here, you can tell he's got that nice, beautiful, scaly skin. When he goes into brumation, his body temperature will drop down to about 35 degrees or so. And where these snakes brumate can be a variety of locations. Natural locations can sometimes be old groundhog tunnels or chipmunk tunnels. Snakes themselves cannot dig holes, so they have to depend on other animals' holes. The other places are natural rock crevices, and then places that people have helped with, like stone walls, old cisterns, old wells that are dry, are really common places to find snakes that will hibernate or brumate for the winter. Like I said, there can be up to 25 to 30 snakes in a spot, and that means they're traveling a pretty far distance, sometimes upwards of a mile, to find just the right spot to spend the winter. A lot of these snakes will use the same spot year after year after year. And snakes like this can live well over 20, 25 years even in the wild.
Which is pretty impressive, again, for their size.
Yep.
And especially we have some mammals that have much shorter life expectancies. Like everyone's
Absolutely.
surprised to learn that, say, the Virginia opossums that we have, which is our native species, only have a life expectancy of about 3 years.
That's right.
So to have a reptile that can have their body temperature drop to 30 degrees, live 20 years is pretty amazing.
Yep, and so they do. They spend several months in these hibernaculums. They usually go in about November and get up usually about April, but if we have a late, it gets cold late in the year, they might go in slightly later. If we have an early spring, they might be up a little bit sooner as well. These couple advantages to being with a group of snakes for the wintertime. One of those advantages is that they can help to retain moisture for the winter. Having a lot of snakes together helps retain some moisture. And then the other thing is when snakes of the same species, especially garter snakes, actually brumate together, when they wake up, they're all set for mating. So there's lots of snakes all together in the same spot to
So they don't
mate.
actually have to search for a mate.
So-
They're already together.
That's right. So you can see that eastern rat snakes are constricting snakes. They're really strong, and they're also amazing tree climbers, and that's why she's wrapped around my arm right now. I'm going to let her just get right down in to here.
Toby's being very helpful on going back into that sack that helps with transport. It's nice
That's
and
right.
dark, and it's soft and warm. So great spot to curl up.
They do.
Our friends Carol are chiming in, so it's 18 degrees where she is in Massachusetts. Nicole May is saying hello from Dallas. Hello, all the way
Excellent.
from Dallas. It is
Wonderful.
36 degrees even there.
Whoa, okay.
That's chilly for Texas. She grew up 20 minutes from Mystic, so thanks for chiming back in and staying nature-centered with us.
That's great. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is our turtle species. And so I'm going to focus on two of our turtles today. I'm going to focus on painted turtles and box turtles, and we'll see which one's where. There we go. All right, let's talk about box turtles first. Those box turtles are our only land turtles here in Connecticut. So these guys really spend hardly any time in water. And so they're going to have a different strategy than our aquatic turtle species for the winter. So we've got Clementine right here, one of our eastern box turtles who lives at the Nature Center. All right.
Box turtles are some of my favorites.
Box turtles are just absolutely amazing. Box turtles, just so everyone knows, are a threatened species here in the States. So we are concerned about their numbers. All right, so box turtles, what they do for the winter is they actually dig holes and go underground. They use those back feet to dig a hole, and they
you
will
can see
go.
those nice long nails.
Yep, show them off. There you go, Clementine. See that? And she's going to dig a hole down underneath the soil to hang out for the wintertime. Now, what triggers them to go into their brumation is an air temperature when it gets down into the 40s, as well as the soil temperature. These guys are always climbing around in the dirt, so they want to get down in the soil, and ideally, they need to get underneath the frost line.
So how deep would they have to dig a tunnel?
So it's pretty amazing. You know, here in Connecticut, they don't have to dig as deep as they might in Massachusetts or Maine, depending on the temperature. Here, it averages 10 centimeters to 20 centimeters down. All right, so
Which is still an appreciable
you know,
size.
appreciable amount, you know,
considering-
10 to 20 centimeters, and they'll go deeper if it gets colder. And so,
Again, that's pretty remarkable. If you hold up our turtle again,
yep, see right there. So you
That
think they're
is
going to be
many
10
turtle
centimeters underneath, digging down. As it gets colder, they might have to dig down a little bit further. These guys, they brumate for 5 to 6 months every year. So really, pretty much sleeping half of their life away. And so they spend a lot of time underneath there. Their body temperatures usually go down to the low 30s, like 33, 34 degrees. Box turtles are a turtle that can actually handle a little bit of crystallization inside their body. So if they don't do a great job of digging down deep enough, or there's a sudden particularly cold freeze, and a little bit of their body starts to actually crystallize and freeze, they can survive that.
that is
and
pretty remarkable.
be able
Now,
to
how do
get back
they
out.
breathe down?
Well, there's lots of air pockets in the soil, so they do just fine breathing. Because their metabolic rates have slowed down, their respiration has slowed down because of the cold temperatures, they can get more than enough oxygen in the surrounding soil there. So absolutely incredible how these guys make it through the winter time. Usually soil temperatures get down into the 40s where they are, low 40s, and so that helps to keep them warm. And then as the soil temperature increases, that is the trigger for them to wake up. So even if we get like just a one warm day, that's usually not enough to actually warm up the soil, so it takes them a little bit longer to come on out.
Gotcha. So very different adaptation than we have for a snake. We have
Yeah.
lots of people chiming in with the different temperatures where they are. So as you pull out our next turtle,
curious.
Hello, Val from Pennsylvania. We have Kathy chiming in that it's 28 degrees in Maryland. Jacqueline says in Preston it's 15. Ooh, still chilly there. And we have Brittany chiming in with Piper in Massachusetts who happens to love turtles. We do too, so you have great taste. All right,
great.
so Kim, who do we have here?
All right, so we have Big Mama here, and she is a painted turtle. And when you take a look at this painted turtle here, you can see a very different shape than the box turtle, and that's because they're an aquatic turtle. That smaller, flatter shell is going to help them swim through the water. Nice big webbed feet right here also for swimming. All right, so what are these turtles doing in the wintertime? Believe it or not, they're actually underneath the ice. The pond here at the Nature Center froze over last week with some nice skims of ice, and I wasn't seeing any turtles. And where they are is underneath the water, and then they can go even into the mud at the bottom of the pond. So they'll go right underneath into that mud where they can take in oxygen through their skin, but they also do the fun thing of butt breathing. And so they're
everyone's favorite fact, both adults and children.
They can take in air through their rear ends and get enough oxygen that way, usually. All right. Sometimes, though, the pond, there's so many animals underneath there breathing underneath the ice, and the ice starts getting thicker, that the pond can do something called go hypoxic, which means the animals have used up a lot of the oxygen there. And these turtles actually have a great adaptation for when the air starts to disappear underneath that thick ice. They can use glycogen, which is in their bodies, which is like sugars, and they can use that to fuel themselves to get through the winter. But there's a downside. When you use that glycogen, you end up building up something called lactic acid in your body. And we get lactic acid in our body, like if we run really hard and we get a cramp in our leg or a stitch in our side, that's lactic acid buildup, and it really hurts. And so what these turtles then do is they take calcium from their shell, and they put that into their blood, and that neutralizes the lactic acid. So it's like an acid and a base, like taking an antacid when we have some heartburn or something like that. That is what's happening with these turtles. They're using the calcium from their shells and putting it into their blood to get rid of some of that lactic acid buildup.
So does that stress the turtle to be able to do that?
Their bodies are adapted to do that, and hopefully they don't have to do it for a really long time. And then what'll happen is, when the ice thaws in the springtime and the water temperature and the air temperature goes up just a little bit, these turtles then are desperate to get out and sun themselves. And that's why we see painted turtles sometimes as early as late February, early March, just sitting on a log inside the sun, because that actually reactivates their metabolic systems, and they can rid their bodies of all that extra lactic acid. But just like us, when we have a cramp and we start kind of limping around and we're moving slow, their whole body is kind of cramped up a little bit. So that means turtles, like these guys, are actually moving very slowly in the springtime, which can make them more vulnerable to predators at that time of year.
And so what might feed on them at that time of year?
Oh, so raccoons, possums, skunks, all those things might find them and find them a good meal. Luckily, some of the other turtles, like the snapping turtles that might go for a little baby snapping or baby painted turtle, are also feeling the same way, so they can't catch them. So it's a pretty interesting way that these guys survive the winter. Now, one thing you might notice, especially earlier in the year, you might actually even see a painted turtle swimming around underneath the ice, and they can do that. They're going to move from air pocket to air pocket, use that oxygen before they start, burning glycogen in their own bodies.
So we don't need to panic if we see turtles swimming under the ice. That is okay.
It is absolutely okay, and don't break the ice, because the ice is actually forming an insulating layer between the water below and the air temperature. So people have been naming their air temperatures. Well, water underneath those layers of ice is actually warmer than your 16-degree air.
Or 19 degrees where Kathy is in Belchertown, Mass.
That's right. And so it's really important then that we can not get that cold air going further down into the pond water. So never break the ice of a pond to help a turtle out, because you're really not.
All right, so just leave them where they are and just appreciate their awesome adaptations. And
That's
Kathy
right.
was asking, it is not snowing yet. I think it's expected here
4 to
this
6.
evening.
Yep, 4 to 6 p.m. is what we've been told here.
It keeps changing,
Yep.
ever evolving. We'll see what actually falls out of the sky.
So the other thing that might be really interesting to people is baby painted turtles, because in June or so, we all see the painted turtles finding great places to lay their eggs, sometimes in our yards and in our gardens, and we help the turtles cross the roads. Well, those turtles, technically they all hatched in August, September, maybe early October, but we didn't see a bazillion baby turtles, and that's because they stay underground for the winter time, and then the hatchlings usually will emerge in the spring. So they can get through that first winter just by hanging out in their nest. And then usually in about May and June, those baby turtles actually start making their way down to the ponds. All right, so, and the other thing is those painted turtles that are in the nest, they can also handle a little bit of crystallization, but only as babies. When they're an adult, they can't have anything freezing in their bodies.
Awesome adaptations.
So really neat how snakes and turtles get through the winter time. We have a lot of other turtle species, very similar adaptations to these, like our diamondback terrapin they spend the winter in tidal mudflats. Spotted turtles will be in wetland areas, doing a very similar thing to our painted turtles. So really, really neat to see how all these guys survive the winter.
It is cool how these cold-blooded creatures survive the winter.
All
right. Well, hopefully you guys all learned something new about our reptiles that we have here in Connecticut, and maybe you'll have these species wherever you are as well. Thank you for tuning in to Stay Nature Centered with us. Rosie's back up in the corner, but singing her heart out. For anyone that was wondering about the other noises that we have, Kim, would you like to introduce one of our other residents?
Yes, this was Kai. Kai, I think, was feeling a little neglected today, right over here. And Kai is a grackle who was imprinted and brought to the Nature Center. And he loves to be out and about, and he would be pulling all the cords out of our technology today, so he has to stay in
He's a
when
very
we're not paying
inquisitive
attention.
creature, and while Rosie tends to knock things over, Kai is very good at doing that. So Kai tends to be the voice that you hear on the other end, but typically not the best Facebook Live assistant. Carol is saying, we have another Carol that chimed in, came in late, we'll watch again later. Thank you. Oh, and she has lots of garter snakes.
Excellent. So I bet you have a hibernaculum nearby and that they spend the winter in.
Now, Kim, there is a small snake that we have here in Connecticut that people tend to find in their basements in the wintertime.
Yep.
And what species is that?
That's the ringneck snake, and so it's usually a snake that's about the size of a pencil, and it has a yellow belly, black, the back is black, belly is yellow with a tiny thin yellow ring around its neck. And very small snake, but it is the snake, I would say, out of the calls we get here at the Nature Center about, I've got a snake in my house, I would say 75% end up to be ringneck snakes.
They're very small, they're really fun to watch, and they are great Houdinis.
Yes.
And it will tend to be, if you have a old New England style house that is 100 years plus.
You will have them in occasionally.
So don't worry, they're not bad to have,
Nope.
and they will be just fine.
Yep.
All right, so everyone, again, thanks for tuning in and staying nature-centered with us. Next week, our Facebook Live is all about deer. We thought that would be nice and seasonally appropriate. So hopefully you can tune in with us next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Until then, stay nature-centered and have a great day.